You're listening to the Doctor Is In podcast. This is the show where you get the best tips, tricks, and nutritional hacks to help you and your family get healthier. You'll also hear what works and what doesn't work so you don't have to waste your time and money. All right, let's get started.
Hey, I'm Dr. Martin Jr.
And I'm Dr. Martin Sr.
And this is the Doctors In podcast, and this is episode 139. And today we want to talk about something that's probably the number one reason, or I shouldn't say reason necessarily, but the number one complaint that people have that visit your clinic, and that's low energy or fatigue. No question. Am I right by saying that?
Well, absolutely. And the first question that I ask every patient that's, in my office is, I'm 10 out of 10, and I usually am, and I mean that. Thankfully, I thank the Lord for that, that I'm generally always feeling pretty good. I'm a big baby when I don't.
Well, you played softball last night. How were you at the plate yesterday?
Good.
You had a good night at the plate?
I surprised everybody, They all played the shift on me because they know which way I hit, and then I fool them. The old guy puts it the other way, right?
But Martin Clinic lost last year in the A Division Finals by one run.
By one run, a walk-off.
Thought about that.
All winter.
All winter. But you're highly energetic.
Active, right? And, I'm very thankful for that. I don't want to take that for granted, but I'm also very sympathetic because when people come into the office and they tell me, like I always talk, and, here's the complaint. I'm so tired, Doc, of being tired. I'm tired of being tired. Because once I get the number out of them, it's usually, not always, and it's women. I say, okay, what's the big thing? I'm exhausted. I'm tired. They give me a 1 out of 10, 0 out of 10, 2 out of 10. You know what? They're not good because having low energy all the time, look, you had a long weekend and you're tired on Monday morning, that's sort of normal. But it's never, never, never normal not to have high energy any given day.
And a lot of them are frustrated because the problem with low energy is that it's not a disease. And what we mean by that, our routine blood testing, generally nothing shows up, right? If they're not anemic, then, and the standard blood testing that's ordered, usually this is kind of the scenario that we hear a lot of times. Somebody's not feeling well, they're tired all the time. Like you said, they're tired of being tired, they wake up tired. They go to their doctor, they share that with them, they get a bunch of blood tests, and the blood tests come back normal. And we always ask the question, well, how can things be normal when the person's exhausted? But that's generally what happens, so they're frustrated. And so the doctor generally, or their primary care physician generally, kind of dismisses it after, right? Well, everything's good, you're good. And we like to tell people that energy is not something that should be ignored. And the example that we use all the time is, we like to use it a lot, is the check engine light in a car, right? I get my long line of no skill whatsoever with automobiles or construction from you, who got it from your dad, who got it from their dad.
Martin and son. We'd never made a living fixing cars or having to build anything.
No,
or fix anything.
A friend of mine who fixes my cars, he's a car guy, obviously. And he always asks me, and I always tell him, when he goes to explain it to me, assume that I know nothing about cars. If I push a button and it doesn't start, that's the extent. So if I call in and I said to him, hey, there's something wrong with my car, and he said, well, what's going on? I say it doesn't start. That's it. Nothing else, right? So I get that from
And there's gas in it, so it can't be that.
Yeah, it can't be the gas, and, I know I just got my oil changed, so it can't be that. But here's the thing. Those check engine lights in your car, right? Cars are basically computers nowadays. And those check engine lights can be quite frustrating, right? A lot of people, they ignore it, right? I've even seen people put tape over it because it just drives them crazy.
They don't want to see it.
They don't want to see it. So the check engine light goes on. And the funny thing is with a check engine light, and this has happened to me before because Rob, who's my car guy, I called him up and I said, hey, my check engine light's on. And because he knows my car, he says, well, when was the last time you put gas in it? I'd say, like 3 days ago. Did you tighten the gas cap properly? So then I'm like, oh, for sure I did. And then I said, wait 1 second, though. Let me go check. And then I go in and sure enough, it clicks. And he said, so it could be nothing. It could be your gas cap is not tight enough. Yeah. Or it could be something a little bit more like the thermometer's off. Or it could be something very serious. But it's just a check engine light. It could mean nothing. I mean, listen, if there's air getting in the gas, I mean, it could be a problem if you let it go for a while. That's why check engine light goes on, or it could be very serious. And that the body kind of behaves the exact same way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? The body behaves the exact same way. We get check engine lights that go on all the time, and energy is a check engine light. So when your energy, like if all of a sudden you're like, I just don't have the same kind of energy I used to have, or, like the women that come in or the men that come in and they're exhausted, that's a check engine light. Their body is telling them that something is definitely going on, and it may not be a big deal now, but left untreated or left without figuring out what's causing that could lead to some serious issues down the road, right? So what we want to do on today's episode is we want to kind of talk about the top 3 reasons. So the big 3 reasons why people are fatigued. And this would cover probably 80-90% of the people that have low energy, and for the most part their blood tests would be normal. So let's kind of go through the list. So the most common cause, especially in women, right? The most common cause, but especially in women, of fatigue by far is hormones.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And if you were to narrow down, because, I mean, there are so many hormones in the body, the big 3 hormones that we always talk about, because it always kind of comes down to this, the big 3 hormones that cause fatigue are cortisol, estrogen,
and your thyroid.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you were to prioritize those 3 hormones, so out of those 3 hormones, which one is the most guilty party?
Very close, 1 and 2, and they affect number 3. So and the reason I'm putting
that's not an.
I know it's not a good answer because you wanted one answer, but I got to tell you what.
No, they're all tightly connected.
They're so connected because probably a week ago I would have said estrogen until I had a week. Jeanette said it the other day. One of our nutritionists said to me the other day, we always seem to run on themes in here. Today the theme is stress or cortisol, right? So coming back to your question, what are the 3 are, we said it, it's cortisol, estrogen, which is ovarian, right? Comes from the ovaries, and thirdly, the thyroid. But all of them are connected to each other. So I'd probably say that number 1 is cortisol, closely followed by estrogen, and they affect. Number 3 is thyroid, but the reason that you're low energy is the thyroid's always affected by high levels of cortisol and high levels of estrogen.
Yeah, if you have high levels of estrogen, high levels of cortisol, you have a thyroid issue.
It's slowing down.
It may not show up on a blood test. Mm-hmm. It may not show on a blood. We call that functional thyroid, right? A functional hypothyroid, meaning that your thyroid may be normal, but functionally, when it needs it to do its job, it's sluggish, right? So it's a sluggish issue. So the interesting thing about cortisol is that there's a lot of different ways that cortisol can really kill your energy, right? High cortisol can kill your energy in a whole bunch of different ways. But there's kind of 3 ways, in a sense, 3 big reasons why cortisol kills your energy. Of course, the first one is that cortisol kills your sleep, right? High cortisol, we've done this. If you go back and listen to our last episode, episode 138, we talk about cortisol and how it kills your sleep. So if you're not sleeping well and getting into that deep REM sleep, and you're not releasing the human growth hormone and all those kind of things, you're not resetting your circadian rhythms off, you're tired. You're tired. There's no question. That's the one way. The second way is, think of the effect that cortisol has on blood sugar levels. Yeah. So it's like this yo-yo effect all day. The primary purpose of cortisol is to raise blood sugar. So your blood sugar levels are elevated because you have high cortisol. And of course, as we've said so many times, blood sugar is toxic. You can't just have high blood sugar levels. So your body secretes insulin. Insulin lowers your blood sugar, and then cortisol brings it back up, and insulin brings it back down. And you get this yo-yo effect all day.
Big time.
So, and that kills their energy. Cortisol is one of the more inflammatory hormones. It creates inflammation. It irritates the gut lining. It increases inflammation throughout the body, right? Somebody who's high levels of cortisol has high levels of inflammation. And as we've talked about on our age-proofing webinar that we did a while ago, nothing drives aging faster than inflammation. Inflammation is the primary driver of aging, as well as a few other things.
Free radicals
and high insulin. But they're connected.
It's a double-edged sword, yep.
So if you have high levels of inflammation, you're tired. There's a lot of other ways that cortisol kills your energy. But at the end of the day, especially for a woman. If you're fatigued, there's a good chance your hormones are off, they're unbalanced, and specifically you've got an issue with cortisol, you have an issue with estrogen, and then you have an issue as well with thyroid. Your thyroid's sluggish, it's slowing down.
And I always, I'm always emphasizing, never accept being tired as normal. It's not normal. So a lot of people think, well, that's my new normal, right? Yeah, I've been tired, doc, for a lot of years, and I get all my blood work done. And my thyroid's coming back within normal limits and all that. But never accept that, because it's never benign, in the sense that if you have low levels of energy, it is never normal. It's often subclinical, meaning they can't pick it up. But this is why we do biomarkers. This is why we look outside that box. We look at the things. We look at things in combination. We don't look at estrogen without it knowing its effect on thyroid. We don't look at cortisol, the adrenal, and you can literally get adrenal gland exhaustion. Some people come in with that. They've actually got to the point that the cortisol was high for such a long period of time, it exhausted the adrenals. And that causes a whole syndrome, in a sense, chronic fatigue syndrome, which is, I believe is an adrenal exhaustion. It's when the cortisol for such a long period of time just gets drained. Now you're messed up, and we call that our metabolic storm. We have a whole course on it, that you're in a category 5 and you got everything is going down. And, a lot of people would identify just listening to this today. They know exactly what we're talking about. And they're all messed up.
The interesting thing is that, as you were mentioning just off air before we came on, that another complaint that kind of goes along with fatigue is weight gain, right? Mm-hmm. And you can see it's the same hormones, the very same hormones that kill your energy also kill your metabolism, right? And that's why, as you mentioned, that program we have, the Fix Your Metabolic Storm program, deals with the underlying issue that makes you tired, it causes you to gain weight, and when you fix that, it's really exciting to see the results that these women have had. And these women have had long-standing hormonal problems and couldn't lose weight for the life of them. But when they fix a few things, it's just amazing how fast the body wants to heal itself. So the number one cause really is hormones. That's probably the most common reason why women and men are tired, but women especially. So that's the first one. Let's talk about the second cause of fatigue, and this is a big one as well, which is deficiencies. And really specifically, if you were to list probably the number one deficiency that leads to poor energy, would be what?
B12, vitamin B12. Again, we talk about it a lot. It's such a key vitamin. That your body does not operate properly without B12. And the vast majority, and I mean this sincerely, the vast majority of people are deficient in B12. And B12, from hormones to your metabolism, to your brain, to your skeletal system, your muscle system, B12 is an essential vitamin. It's often overlooked. The blood work for B12 it's 100 years old. Give it a birthday party and send it to bed. I had a doctor the other day just call me on B12, and because your patient and my patient, she said to me, are high in B12. I said, good. Yeah. That was my aim. I was trying to get them to, well, it's way above normal. I said, okay, so what does that mean?
Yeah, how are they feeling now?
Yeah, they're feeling better with it, right? Yeah, but that's high. I said, so what? What does it mean? And, then you wait for the answer. Of course, the answer doesn't come because there's no answer to it. Like, I want them to be high in B12.
And that goes back again to why that range that they test for has been determined to be the range of optimal. There's a difference between deficiency and optimal, and you see that with vitamin D. You see that with a lot of the other vitamins as well. So B12, and what's interesting about B12 is you don't have to get a B12 shot in order to get your B12 levels back up again.
No.
In fact, you prefer the sublingual B12 that we have.
Yeah, because if you're deficient in it, think about it, then you're better off to take it every day. Like, you can go get a shot once a month, and doctors are reticent today. They don't like to give it because they got away from it. Doctors of the past were, B12 shots for you're tired, here's a B12 shot. They knew the remedy for fatigue, but they got away from it just because, your B12 is normal. We've said this before, and we just emphasize again, it's not to be negative. It's just reality of medicine today. The lab tells the doctor what's wrong. It controls their behavior in a way. Like, what happened to instincts? Like you see patients. I've seen patients, thousands and thousands of patients over the years. I can just look at people and go, you know what? You're not looking good. Like, I don't have to see their blood work to say, I look at a lady, I can think of her yesterday. I looked at her, I said, you're anemic. She looks at me, what? I said, you're anemic. I can tell just by looking at your color. You got no color. And of course, she's exhausted, whatever. And I look at, I said, yeah, I told you, you're anemic. What happened to those instincts? I get a little frustrated because people come to me and, no, everything's good.
Yeah,
according to the lab, everything is
they're
good.
so over-reliant on, and that's the thing, we see this a lot with thyroid. You can have every symptom in the book that practically screams thyroid, and yet the blood test comes back, and then the doctor's like, well, it looks like your thyroid's good.
Yeah. Can't be your thyroid. It's impossible.
No.
Well, sure, it's possible. Maybe you didn't do all the tests. Maybe you're looking at, it's not a disease,
it is frustrating.
Right? You're gaining weight. Your
hair's
fatigue,
falling out,
your hair's
eyebrows
falling
are
out.
thin. I mean, it's crazy.
Remember the eyebrow test?
Yeah.
I love that because you look at the eyebrows and go, oh, wow, you got a thyroid issue, right?
So B12 is another big cause, and it's an easy fix as well, right, is B12. Yeah. And then the third major cause would be insulin, which is...
Ta-da!
Yeah. And, it's interesting, right? It's kind of the opposite. You and I have talked about this before, but you have, 3 hormones that raise blood sugar and then one that brings it down. So it's no surprise then that if they got an issue with cortisol, which brings it up, they're going to have an insulin issue as well. And the fact of the matter is people eat foods that make them tired, no question, right? And it's generally high processed, crappy carbs, generally the issue, right? And the funny thing about insulin is, think about it this way. Because, as I mentioned, glucose is toxic. So basically everything you eat is broken down into glucose. Your blood sugar levels go up. High blood sugar is dangerous. So you put some insulin in there and insulin gets rid of it. Well, if you have high insulin all the time and you're constantly fighting your blood sugar, insulin takes glucose out of your blood and stores it. And glucose in your blood is there for energy purposes. So you're not burning off energy. Also, when you have insulin in your blood, you're also not burning fat for energy. So your furnace is not working properly. You're removing the glucose from the blood, and you're also not putting fatty acids out there so that you can burn them as ketones and burn them off. So, it creates a problem in so many different ways. Plus, high insulin makes you inflamed, kills your energy that way. High insulin is stressful, brings up cortisol. On and on and on.
Diet's important, isn't it?
Which is why it's amazing when people control their insulin or they eat in a way that stabilizes their blood sugars, and they make sure that their B12 levels are optimized, and they fix their hormones, their energy always comes back. Now, our most popular supplement by far, I got a couple of them that are pretty neck and neck now, but has always been, we've had it for such a long time, is our Navital, because it's a pine bark extract. And, of course, pine bark extract holds a special place in our family, obviously because of the effect it had on Mom. It really fixed her energy, right? So there are a lot of good things out there that you could take to improve energy. There's no question, right? And what's interesting about, we just looked at a study off air, and we have a private Facebook group called the Martin Clinic Club. If you want to join it, go to our website and just look for the Martin Clinic Club. Join it. It's a private Facebook group. We were just doing a Facebook Live in there just before coming on and doing this podcast. And we talked about that new study that came out that said 1 in 3 adults are taking a medication that's exposing them to depression, right?
Yeah. Increases their depression by 1/3, right? The risk of depression by 1/3.
Well, it's insane,
isn't it?
No, it's 1/3 of 1 in 3 medications.
Well, 1 in 3 medications increases the risk of depression.
It's sad. So a lot of these patients, they come in, they're on medications, they're depressed, they're exhausted, and this is the thing. It's kind of a pet peeve of ours. A lot of the times, these women go to their doctor and they're not feeling well, and their doctor says, "Well, it's depression." And it's kind of like the chicken and the egg. I mean, they're depressed because they're not feeling well. I mean, if you're exhausted all the time, it's pretty hard not to feel depressed or anxious, right? So it's kind of, they enter into this kind of real, we use the term metabolic storm, but it's this real storm that goes around them where they got low energy, they're gaining weight, they're not sleeping well, they're feeling depressed, they're feeling anxious, and it's amazing. But the nice thing is we're here to tell you it's very fixable. And the nice thing is it's fixable by just changing some of the things you're eating and then adding some nutrients, some key nutrients that make a big, big difference.
Yeah.
So we want to thank you for listening to this episode. If you have any questions, you can go to our website at martinclinic.com. There we have live chat that goes on. You can email us at info@martinclinic.com. You can join you every Thursday morning. You do a Facebook Live where you answer questions. You're answering a ton of questions, a ton of people on there, and you're just, again, you had a technical difficulty this past week. It was funny. We were laughing. You went live. So here we are. You go live, and you went live on your...
You hired a dinosaur, you're going to have some issues.
You went live on your personal page, which you have so many privacy settings in there that nobody was able to watch it. And people were messaging us and, hey, where's the Facebook Live? And our staff's like, no, he's on live. I can see him. It's because they're all your friends on Facebook, so they could see you. And then when I looked at it, as soon as I saw it, I saw you were going live from your page. So I messaged you. Of course, you got all your notifications off. So, man, you did a 40-minute Facebook Live to all your nephews and cousins and family. So it was awesome. Well, even you were commenting on there for a while. It's like, oh, I got a lot of grandkids on there. Anyway, so aside from the technical difficulties, you do a Facebook Live every Thursday. We also jump into our new group that we have as well, where we answer some questions and talk about a few different things. So there's a lot of ways that you can get in touch with us, a lot of ways that you can get information as well about your health. So again, we want to thank you for listening. Have a great day.